We are both a provider to Seismic. So we actually provide Seismic's sales and customer success methodology training. They are also a partner of ours when we work together and they resell our services into their accounts. So the topic today is around sales methodology in the age of AI, and really excited to share with the group our perspective on how AI is changing the buying and selling journey, and also how organizations are evolving and continuing to improve their methodologies in light of that. One thing I'll mention, so does anybody here know Toby Harrington? Well, Toby told me to say this, so I'll say it. Toby said, if you've enjoyed your experience of buying and working with Seismic, we've played a big part in that. So if you think about kind of your teams and the way you want your teams to engage, we work very closely with the Seismic team in terms of how they actually work with their customers. So before we dive in and talk about AI, though, I want to go on a little bit of a history lesson, and we're going to play a fun game called Who is This Old White Guy? So first old white guy. I'm an aspiring old white guy, so I can do this. Who this old white guy is? No takers. All right. His name is Tim Sanders. He's actually a historian, and he's written a book called The First 100 Years, The History of the Sales Professional. So he's actually a professor at Amherst University, a history professor, wrote a book about the first 100 years of the sales profession in the industrialized age. One of the quotes in that book is, around the year 1900, it was largely assumed that traveling salespeople would no longer exist due to the prevalence of the telephone. Raise your hand here if people at your sales organization travel to see customers. All right, so we've got one strike on future of sales predictions. Next, anybody know who this old white guy is? He's slightly more famous than Tim. So this old white guy is Peter Drucker. You may not know what he looks like, but you've probably heard of him. In the mid 50s through the 80s, he was a very prevalent management thinker. And in 1973, he wrote the following: the advent of mass advertising and mass communications will largely reduce the requirement for sales professionals. Anybody care to guess how many sales professionals, business sales professionals, were employed in 1973? It was about 500,000. Anybody care to guess how many there are now? It's about, so, and I'm only talking North America, but it's about 4.2 million in North America. So safe to say this prediction also has not come true. Final guess, this old white guy. Anybody know who this old white guy is? This is a guy named Andy Hoare. He's an analyst at Forrester. In 2015, Forrester wrote a report that said the following: over the next 5 years, so by 2020, over 1 million sales professionals, B2B sales professionals, will lose their job due to the prevalence of the internet and e-commerce. All right, so we just talked about now there are 4.2 million sales professionals. Does anybody know how many there were in 2015? It was about 3.7. It was 3.7. So actually, if you look at it, that obviously did not come true. So why do I bring this up? If we think about the time we're living in right now, just go around the room. Like, what are some things people have heard about the way that AI is changing buying and selling? Our product is so great because you don't need any SDRs. Okay, that's one. What are some other things people have heard about AI and buying and selling? Yeah, we sort of hear these two wild things. So there's sort of this like one school of thought, which is like, we're just going to get rid of sales reps. There's another school of thought, which is AI going to take your job? If you don't learn how to use AI, you're going to lose your job. What else have people heard? Capacity creation. So you're creating more capacity. You can create more capacity. You can reach more customers. You can do more. Every time there's a major technology platform shift, there's a large group of people who start predicting that business-to-business sales professionals will die. So if you think about the first one of those being the telephone. I mean, this is kind of crazy to imagine, but if you imagine you're a person living in 1875, before the advent of the telephone and widespread distribution of that, literally the only way for you to learn about a new product or service was someone to physically come see you. You know, there wasn't mass marketing, there wasn't the telephone. So then the telephone came along. There was a prediction, there will be less salespeople, we won't need salespeople, we won't need traveling salespeople because we'll have the telephone. After the telephone came mass advertising. We're not going to need salespeople anymore because we have mass media, we have mass advertising, we have the ability to actually reach people. Then came the internet. Now you don't have to wait to get your newspaper to get information. You have information, all the information you can possibly handle in your pocket, in your phone. Now we have AI. That's the next big platform shift when we think about technology platform shifts and adoption of that platform shift. Now, there are some things that are different about this, which we'll talk about as we go through this. But if we look at history and what history tells us, every time there's a major technology platform, there is a wide-scale group of predictions about the end of sales. And what has happened, it's not that salespeople go away, but it's that the nature of the role changes. If you think about each one of these platform shifts, the major underlying theme behind each one is it creates greater parity in buyer and seller information. So if the only way that I as a buyer have to get information about your product is for you to physically come see me and tell me about it, who has all the information? The seller. If I now can ask a bot or a ChatGPT or whatever to take all publicly available information and summarize that for me, who has more information now? Buyer. And I would say largely the buyer and seller have parity on what I would describe as publicly available information. So what is happening is with each one of these platform shifts, there's much greater information parity. And as that information parity happens, it changes the nature of the sales role. If you were a seller at IBM in the 80s, there was a very good chance that your customers, when you went to go see them, literally did not know about your products and what they did. How many of your companies today would say that our customers can't figure out what our product does without us? None, right? So like, if you think about that evolution, what's changing is the amount of information parity that we have. Now, what that means is that it changes the role of the seller and it changes how the seller has to engage and what the value add for the seller is. If we look at this shift in terms of the move to AI, the first place that this is really impacting is buying. So we're going to talk about its impact on sales, but AI is already having a big impact in terms of buying. Has anybody here read the G2 2025 buyer behavior report by chance? I see a couple nodding heads. I see at least one nodding head. So here's the thing that's really interesting. AI is continuing this pattern of creating greater buyer and seller information parity. If you look at, so what G2 does, they're a software review site. They also look at buyer behavior every year and sort of like what are the main things influencing buyer behavior. So if you look at sources, influence, vendor shortlisting, Gen AI chatbots is now number one. 2 years ago, Gen AI chatbots were not on the list. So if you look at how it's changing buying, where you're getting found, where customers are going to search out information about your product, your service, your company, is now largely Gen AI. In my view, this is having a much bigger impact on like top of funnel marketing, those sorts of things, because your traditional Google search, SEO, all that's changing quite a bit. So like this is really, really disrupting that space. But from a seller and a sales methodology perspective, one of the things that means, right, is like if my buyers are getting information about our company off of ChatGPT, what does that mean I need to know? What ChatGPT is saying about our company, right? Because you can safely assume that your buyers are now using ChatGPT to learn about your company. That means you need to be spun up on what is it saying. And by the way, based on where we are in terms of the maturity of large language models, is that right or not? So I literally one day typed in the exact same question to ChatGPT, got two completely different answers. And I was like, so the other thing, right, that you have to be savvy about as a seller now is your buyers are getting information from this. That information may not always be accurate or correct or have the right context for them. Here's the really interesting part. Gen AI chatbots are now also the most trusted source for buyers, which is kind of wild, right? So as a seller, that means I need to know what it's saying. But I also need to understand what are the things that really matter to buyers that AI can't answer for them. This is what's happening on the buying side. ChatGPT is becoming a major source of information, and it's trusted by buyers. Now, buyers are getting smarter, but selling organizations are now also starting to implement their own use cases to try to get sped up and work on this. And so selling organizations, we've spent the past year looking at our customers. Our customers are in a variety of industries, variety of sizes and scale, really talking with our customers who are advanced about the implementation of AI, about what types of use cases are they deploying, what types of use cases are they implementing, what kind of results are they getting. And here's what we've learned. There are three big categories of AI use cases that we see organizations implementing right now. So one is rep replacement. There are in certain functions, so especially things that are very repetitive, very transactional, very cookie cutter, where there's not a large amount of complexity. There are places where agents are replacing reps. We're seeing this mostly as an adjacent to what you would call product-led growth. So a lot of PLG-related companies are companies where you can largely buy whatever they sell via filling out a web form. So if you could buy using a buying portal or buy online with a credit card, you can largely now do a lot of that with an agent, and you can do some slightly more complicated things with that. If you get into anything that's complex, this is still really not happening, and we're not seeing people successfully doing that. The other place we're seeing a lot of implementation of rep replacement is on the customer service, customer success side, especially for more support, deflection, those kinds of things. There's kind of a sales rep replacement or a people replacement component. That's happening mostly in very repetitive, simplistic types of things. We're also seeing kind of a flavor of this, which is like augmentation. So we're not getting rid of people, but we're having the same amount of people doing more things. which in many cases we kind of think of as seller efficiency. So there's a second group of use cases which is really on seller efficiency. So this is things like document creation, RFP automation, sales engineer kind of bot replication. So I have, rather than having to get a sales engineer on every call, I can handle a few calls with basically a technical expert bot before I have to bring in my sales engineer. Other things like being able to look at territory optimization, kind of more, I call them more like sales ops, rev ops use cases. There's a lot that's going on in terms of seller efficiency. And what we're seeing here is like people are getting a lot of material productivity gains in terms of time savings and capacity creation. The thing that's interesting is that capacity creation is not always and frequently is not translating into better results. So people are getting more capacity, but they're not necessarily getting better results. And we'll talk about why that is, which is that largely the third category of things that people are focused on is seller effectiveness. So if you think about things like coaching, if you think about things like AI coaching bots, if you think about things like content creators, next best actions, things that are supposed to help the rep to be more effective at the point of engagement with the customer, largely these things are not showing results today. We'll talk about some patterns around this and what's happening with this. But if you look at the big three categories of AI use cases, so for the right types of things, sales rep replacement use cases are largely working as people hope they would, not for complex, but for simple, repetitive tasks. Seller efficiency, there are a lot of use cases that people have put in place where they're getting some really meaningful gains in terms of efficiency and potentially capacity. When you look at effectiveness, people are really not seeing the results in terms of effectiveness. And here's what's happening. When people are putting in place AI solutions that are intended to kind of improve the effectiveness of sellers, A players getting better, B players staying the same or maybe getting marginally better, C players are actually getting worse. We'll talk about why this is in a moment, but that is the big unlock when we think about why and how do we deal with this sort of AI world. That's the place where people are struggling. And that's also why when you think about sales methodology skills, the human piece, that's still really relevant. So let's talk about some examples in terms of use cases that were intended to improve effectiveness and what happened. So at a software company, what are the two places that deals typically die? So the two places that deals typically die is like stage 2 and stage 4, like kind of roughly speaking, depending on how you map your stages. When we think about stage 2 is, do we have the right level of discovery? Do we have the right business, kind of bones of the right business case? Do we have the right technical proof points? And then the next place that usually dies is like if you get a proposal, not usually it dies when we get voted because we didn't do the right work beforehand. So in their case, one of the things they were trying to do, they were trying to improve their stage 2 conversion rate. So the number of opportunities that come in at stage 2, can we get more to convert to stage 3? One of the things that they found is that a critical piece of moving from stage 2 to stage 3 was, did we have a good point of view around this customer, their business situation, and why they should do business with us that's going to resonate with the audience we're working with? So one of the things they did, they built a little chat bot to build POVs for their prospects and customers based off of their use cases, personas, type of business they were. Here's what was really interesting. A players, 18% increase in stage 2 opportunities. B players increased 0.5%. C players actually went down by 6%. Anybody have any ideas why this is? So if you have an A player, they can get this information out of the POV builder. They can tweak it, they can tune it. But more importantly, when they go convey it to the customer, they can do it with conviction and they can sort of move and dodge and work with the customer to evolve that and collaborate around it. Your B player can talk to a customer about it, but if they ask very hard questions, it's sort of like, C player literally copies and pastes it on a slide. If anybody asks a question, they're like, that's a good question. Now we'll talk about a different use case, which is financial planning creators. That what they would do is after somebody had a meeting with a prospect or customer, they took all of their different data points. I mean, it was quite a data science effort. Made this little generator that would say, hey, for this potential client, based off of what we know about them, here's the way that our most successful clients think about this. And here would be recommendations we would have for them. So it would sort of create a rough outline of a financial plan. Interestingly enough, A players, 9% increase in client conversion. B and C players, 0% increase in client conversion, right? So if you think about this, you think about why this is exactly what we just talked about. A player can take that and go have a conversation with a prospect or customer around that is meaningful and relevant to that person. Everybody else shows it to them, but they can't really have the right engagement with them around it. They can't have the right discussion around it. They don't have the credibility to actually then engage with that person around, well, hey, why is this relevant for you? And how do we need to tweak this for your specific situation? So that, again, really interesting. Productivity increasing for A players, not for B and C players. Let's talk about a third example. Who here has a sales organization where you have like a very territory driven model, high activity, lots of customers in the field. Yeah. So this one is really common. We're seeing this a lot in like industrial adjacent, ed tech, healthcare. So any organization where you have a very territory driven model where within a given territory, you may have a high number of prospects. So one of our customers looked at their territories and did some interesting things. They merged together purchase data from their own piece, plus they merged together also market data. So they bought some market data. They also had their own purchase data. They married that together and looked at within our territories, which accounts are most likely to be in buying cycle and for what, and what should we go talk to them about. So if you're a rep, you show up on Monday and it says, hey, here are the accounts you should call in your territory. Here's what they're likely to be buying. Here's what you may want to talk to them about out of our catalog. Same thing, very interestingly. A players, 14% productivity lift. B players, 2% productivity lift. C players, 0% productivity lift. The reason I brought three very different examples is we're seeing this over and over again, which is AI use cases that are focused on increasing rep productivity are benefiting people at the top, and largely B and C players are getting marginal to no gains from it. And this is across a lot of different industries, like literally people who sell widgets to factories and financial planners could not be more different in terms of their like day-to-day life and what they're interested in. So what this is saying to us is when it comes to increasing productivity using AI, skills, coaching, methodology still matters, because the more talented, more skilled people you have, the more disproportionate advantage you're going to get from whatever AI you implement when it comes to productivity improvement. So what does that mean? What are we seeing? What we're seeing with our customers, which is really fascinating, is that the ones who are really winning, the ones who are accelerating, are pairing AI innovations and AI use cases and all the great stuff you can do with evolving their sales methodology to meet how buying is changing. And so when we look at our customers that are really winning right now, they are combining both a lot of the technology, a lot of the forward-leaning things you can do, but they are also accelerating and investing in how they build their core methodologies. And a few things around that. When we think about methodology, three big pieces we think of. So one is your process, your tools, and your skills. A lot of the AI stuff is very much accelerating what we can do from a tools perspective and improving the UI and user experience around a lot of the tooling. However, what we're seeing is if people aren't also pairing that with really good discipline in terms of process and skills, they're not seeing the actual benefits of all the tooling that they're putting in place. So from our view and from our perspective, the way the sales methodology is evolving in the age of AI is that AI is a tool to help you better execute and better evolve on the process and skills that you need to have in place. And if you don't pay attention to the process and skills, you think that AI is going to magically solve our problems. What we're seeing is that people are having a very rude awakening around that and really having a lot of challenge getting value out of the investments they've made in AI if that's not paired with right process, right skills. Now, when we think about skills in the age of AI, there are certain skills that make a bigger difference than others from what we're seeing. Three core skills that we're seeing, really four core skills that we're seeing that are making a big difference in the age of AI. So one is, do we have a strong understanding of value? I've been in this business a long time, and I cannot tell you the number of conversations I've had with people where the net of what they are telling me is our organization does not understand well enough the value that we provide to people, and we are not good at communicating that in a way that's relevant to our customers. So that's number one. That's both an organizational and individual issue. Second skill is really important. Being curious. So being truly curious about your industry, your market, your specific client. One of the things that we're seeing as buyers have more information and as there's greater parity between buyer and seller knowledge is that the value of the sales rep is in all the stuff that's not publicly available, right? If you think about selling to, let's just say a complex business organization, largely they can learn, not everything, but they can learn a lot about your solution independently and form a lot of opinions. What they can't do is get everyone, and this is what the best sales reps do, learn enough about the organization to be able to get people with competing priorities, competing agendas, conflicting needs to get on the same page about what should we do. AI has not yet created that chasm where it can now do that. Secondly, AI can't effectively understand what should I do based off of our company, our maturity, and the problem set which we're facing. Who here has ever had a situation where you had two prospects on the outside look completely identical, but in terms of the way their business worked and the inner workings of where they were, totally different? Anybody ever had that situation? Right. So you could have two wealth managers, you could have two banks, you could have 2 industrial companies that if you just look at demographic information and what's publicly available, they look exactly the same. If you get under the hood of like what's actually going on in that company in terms of their processes, how they work, the political dynamics, totally different. And if you take the exact same approach that ChatGPT spits out for you to both of those companies, you're likely to fail. So when you think about being curious and why that's so important, it's really understanding the nuances and all the things that go beyond what you can learn on the internet. Because that's really where people are winning, is in understanding that context, that organizational dynamics, the priorities, who cares about what, how we align around that. Secondly is the ability to have a point of view. So the ability to have a point of view is the second skill that we're seeing is really, really critical. And it's a point of view for your customers about what should they do based on their business situation. So based off of all of those things that are, let's say, outside of the internet, based on your experiences working with other customers, based off of what you've seen work well for people at their size, stage, maturity, what should they do? And in today's world, as a rep, if you don't have a point of view for your customer, largely you become what? The same or worse than using ChatGPT, right? If your value add is, hey, I can tell you about our product, hey, I can tell you about this, hey, I can tell you about that, your value add is now less than ChatGPT. So if you can't say, hey, here's what we understand what you're trying to accomplish, here's our point of view about the best way to do this, you are largely losing the information parity war. And the third piece is the ability to build momentum. So one of the things that folks I've heard say several times is that like eventually AI is just going to be able to buy for us. And that might be true in very commoditized spaces. However, and this is a rhetorical question, but how much has the internet helped people get on the same page about things? Not much, right? So if we think about, I encourage everybody to look it up. There's an interview with Bill Gates where he's talking about the advent of the internet and how they thought that internet was going to lead to a new age of enlightenment where people would have more access to reason and thought. And he was like, we're actually wrong. Basically what happened is people who agree with each other could find other people who agree with them faster. And now they can all just argue with each other on the internet. So why do I bring that up? Like if getting organizations to agree and make decisions about complex things were as easy as let's ask a bot, it would have already happened with let's ask Google. And so from our perspective and what we see is that yes, bots are smarter. They're going to continue to get smarter. But if you think about the idea that like the bot is just going to buy for you, that's not likely to happen. And so what does that mean? From a rep perspective, that means you still have to be able to do two things. You got to be able to create decision momentum, but also build decision confidence, because there's a thought process that more information creates better decision clarity. And what we've seen over the past 10 years is that's just simply not the case. If you look at every study, there are more people involved in decisions. There's more confusion about decisions. There's a zillion studies about buyer behavior, and they all say that more information is not helping people make better decisions. So if you think about the rep and the role of the rep, two things. One is creating a reason to change, but also helping to create decision confidence and decision certainty. So when we think about skills, those are the skills that we really see that those A players. So if we go back and say, here are the people who are getting value from AI, those are the skills that those A players have and are using in their day-to-day lives to make a difference in their prospects and customers. Here's the next piece. So who here has heard something along the lines of like, AI is going to remove the need for manager coaching or something like that? Yeah. So what is the number one objection to manager coaching? I don't have time. So if you ask 500 sales managers, do you coach as much as you want to? They will all universally tell you, I don't have enough time to coach. So one of our customers said, great, you don't have enough time to coach? Very cool. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a coaching bot that's going to coach for you. We're going to create a coaching bot that's going to coach for you. Anybody have some predictions in terms of what happened? So it actually followed the exact same pattern. AI coaching bot made A players better, had a negligible impact on B players, and C players stayed the same or worse. Why do you think that is? There's two big dynamics in terms of like why this is. A players usually have one of two categories. Either they are savants and there's nothing you can do to mess them up, and whatever you tell them to do, they'll be fine. Or they rapidly ingest and act on whatever information they get. So the A player would get the information from the bot that immediately they'd either ignore it because they knew better and then they'd be fine, or because they fit more in the savant category, or they would immediately take it, ingest it, act on it. B players may or may not utilize the coaching, may or may not even really like participate with the coaching. So the other thing, right, is like if you have a coaching bot, you can sort of opt out of that. So the A players were A, using it, and B, acting on what it was telling them to do in a reasonably quick fashion. B players using it some, C players maybe using it, maybe not. But there's another piece to it as well, which is a lot of the value of coaching is not just in the, hey, what should you be doing? How do we do that? But it's also in helping people to self-discover, helping people to come to their own conclusions, and inspiration and accountability. So when you think about coaching and the value of coaching, it's not just about, do I have the right information? But it's also about, can I help inspire this person? Can I help motivate this person? Can I help provide a reason for this person to embrace new behaviors? So here's the part that's really interesting. After they put a human component in around the AI bot, what do you think happened? B and C players started improving. So originally their thesis was, hey, managers, you don't have time to coach. We're going to need a bot to do it for you. They tried that for about 9 months and said, this is not working. So let's put a human in the loop, right? So what can the AI do? The AI can make your coaching more efficient. It can help give you a lot more information. It can help make those coaching conversations easier to prep for, but you still need that interaction between manager and rep in order to actually drive the performance. And so what they found after they started getting human in the loop is they started seeing actual progress, especially in the B player group, started seeing a lot of progress with that group after they put the human back in the loop. One of the things that I've heard a lot about AI is like AI is going to do coaching for managers. And what we've seen thus far in terms of people that have tried it is it can make the coaching more efficient. It can make it easier for managers to do coaching. It can reduce the burden, but it can't replace the manager. You can't outsource the coaching to the AI. The other piece that we're seeing a lot as it relates to methodology, skills, and coaching is that there is a continuous evolution of methodology, of skills, of coaching based off of your organizational maturity in terms of go-to-market and product maturity. So one of the other things that we're seeing is that there's sort of another underlying thing that's happening as AI is being added to many products, is being brought into many different areas, especially in the technology space. Companies are becoming much more platforms, right? Companies are becoming much more platforms. The value is evolving in terms of what is the value to the end buyer. Their organizational structure is evolving. So one of the other things when we think about methodology and skills is that there's a market view around this in terms of what do you need to do to be successful with your buyers, but there's also a company view around this, which is as your company matures, as your company evolves, you've got to continuously think about, do we have the skills? Do we have the coaching approach? Do we have the methodology we need to win based off of where we are from a product perspective, from a market perspective, and from a go-to-market maturity perspective? And so one of the other big things we're seeing right now is because of all the transformation that's happening with AI, it's causing a lot of evolution. It's causing a lot of evolution in terms of product and go-to-market maturity, which is causing organizations to have to rethink, do we have the right methodology, the right skills in place that can actually make a difference for where we want to go as a company? So when you think about methodology and what is the value of methodology, one of the things that I've been doing this a long time, and like I've never seen anybody properly implement sales methodology and get worse results. So like if we just talked about a lot of examples where we implemented AI, we got some results at the top of the pyramid, not as much throughout. I personally have never seen a company implement sales methodology and actually implement it, not send everybody to a class at SKO and then forget about it, but actually implement sales methodology and not get results. And think about kind of results people get, increase in terms of revenue growth, deal size, win rate, productivity per rep. In terms of bang for the buck, if you do it right, there are very few things that you can do that make a bigger impact on your business than proper implementation of methodology on the sales and customer success side. The other reason that this is really important is as follows. If you think about all the things like guided selling, next best action, all that stuff, what does that all rely on? What does AI rely on? Data. What do you need in order for data to be relevant? Structure. Like you need structure in process, right? So we had a customer that tried to look at their Salesforce data and have guided next best action based off of that. And the reality is their Salesforce data was so dirty that what the AI could tell them was very, very negligible. So if you don't have the right process, if you don't have the right common language, the right skills in place, you can put whatever sort of AI accelerant you want on top of it. And all you're going to have is a bunch of guided next steps that are based off a bad foundation. So if we think about the value of sales methodology, one is it is one of the best things you can do in terms of increasing your productivity of your people, number one. Number two, whatever AI tooling, if you really start to think about like predictive type of stuff, is going to rely on having a good process foundation. And from a skills perspective, at least right now, the people who are getting the most value out of AI are more skilled reps. So the more that you invest in people's skills, the more you upskill them. That is also giving you another kicker in terms of now when we stick this AI layer on top, these people are actually going to be even more productive. So from our view, right now is a great time to be investing in developing your teams, investing in developing their skill sets so that they can get the full value of all the incredible AI innovation that exists today. Now I'm gonna finish this off with an interesting quote. So I was with the operating partner at a big VC firm. So they have about 400 portfolio companies. He is like the operating partner in terms of sales and customer success. So he gets to see a huge cross section of companies. And we had a brainstorming session just about like, hey, what are you seeing with AI use cases? What are you seeing with AI use cases? And this is what he said to me, which really stuck with me. He said, all of our portfolio companies are rushing to implement AI. They're getting some results. There's some interesting use cases here and there, but the ones who are really moving the needle are also pairing that with process and skills. And so what we see in what he said, and he's got about 400 companies in their portfolio. They have analytics galore on all the stuff, and more than I could ever probably capture in my own brain. And what he said is, he said, look, the companies that are really getting results right now are the ones that are doubling down on process and skills and marrying that with the AI. So what we see in terms of companies that are going to win over this next period of time is, yes, AI innovation is great. If you don't pair that with continuous upskilling development of your reps, along with a strong process and manager coaching, you're not going to outpace the competition, and AI is not going to be a silver bullet for you. So that's what we're seeing in terms of the market today and kind of the relevance and importance of sales methodology in the current era. Last couple of things. So we do have some courses that are coming to Seismic Exchange coming up. So these are going to be freemium courses if you're interested in content for your teams. And lastly, if we can ever help you. So if we can ever help you, if this is a topic that you're thinking about at your organization where you're interested in potential partners, please reach out to us. And also, if you just want to brainstorm and talk about what you're seeing, feel free to reach out to us. And thank you, everybody, for your time today.